So let's bring in our power panel right now. Say good morning to former Democratic Congressman and Admiral Joe Sestak. Perry Bacon is an MSNBC contributor and political editor for The Griot. Susan Del Percio, Republican strategist and MSNBC contributor. Good morning to you all. And Perry, I want to start with you in regard to Senator Wyden and the phone call that he received last night from President Obama. He appeared this morning on the Today Show talking about what he's looking for today. Take a listen.
I'm committed to making sure that we get all the facts. The president called last night, early this morning. I'm going to be going in to read the opinion. We'll go from there.
All right, so how odd is it, Perry, that the president reached out to Wyden specifically ahead of what is going to be an hearing for Brennan?
This is very unusual, almost unprecedented for the president to call an individual senator before a nominee is going for a hearing. There was a briefing I was just at here today, too. You can tell the White House is definitely shifting from a view that they are just doing the right thing to a view in which they're trying to bring in more members of Congress and the public and try to really explain the drone program. They're also becoming more and more aware that, it's not just President Obama that's using drones, but they're setting a precedent for the future, and they're trying to establish they think they're setting the right precedent. And I think you'll hear that in the hearing today as well.
All right, so the hearing again coming up this afternoon. Admiral Sestak, I want to show everybody the temperature on drone strikes and what the American public thinks about them, and specifically the White House use of them. Support for drone attacks against terror suspects overseas. The approval through the roof, 83%. Then we look at drone attacks against Americans suspected of terrorist activity. Again, it's through the roof here, and approval at 79%, only 17% disapprove. Does the White House, though, have a lot to answer for when it comes to what type of program they've been running and the fact that there have not been checks and balances in place for the last several years in regard to what some would say is an overused program?
Well, I think the White House is correct in its drone usage, even against a U.S. citizen who's decided to turn his arms or her arms against us. As a matter of fact, U.S. law and international law permits the United States or any country to take action and even to kill that citizen. But the issue here, as you well know, is that the rules of war are a little different in terrorism, because sometimes when you're planning something that will happen in a week or two and you have a fleeting moment to get that individual, then the question is, do you still have the right to take him? I believe that we do, but the problem is that the White House has not been transparent in this. And when you are not transparent, particularly where Congress has a constitutional duty to raise and organize armies, to actually declare war, then I think you do harm to what is necessary for the defense of America. So I believe that the White House should have, earlier than this, actually exposed to the criteria. And second, I think there needs to be a post-facto review of strikes, not beforehand, but afterhand, just to make sure that nothing abusive and nothing is being steered wrongly as we continue on these strikes to defend our
Again, to the checks
nation.
and balances. Susan, I want to talk to you, though. First Read points out there's a political whiplash going on because people that you wouldn't expect to have the president's back on this do. Right. Senator Lindsey Graham coming out saying that he's totally supportive of this. You know, the fact that if American citizens are going to be turned into al-Qaeda operatives, that this is the right course. Also, John Bolton saying that it is entirely sensible that they should go ahead and have access to this type of program. Is it surprising that Republicans, especially vocal ones like Lindsey Graham, John Bolton, would support the president? It's
not surprising at all. As a matter of fact, if anything, it's hypocritical of the White House right now to come here. They ran a campaign back in 2008 and even as early as 2000 or latest 2009, criticizing the Bush White House and a lot of the tactics that were used. The president learned unless you're sitting in that chair, you don't know what goes along with that territory. What's interesting is the backlash. He is not getting so much on the left. There are some groups out there criticizing him for it, but they're largely silent, and it does make you wonder what would happen if this happened under a Republican administration.
Well, we're certainly going to find out what the John Brennan has to say, the tough questions that are going to be coming. Obviously, as we've been pointing out, this is going to be the most public, probably the most telling expose of the drone program, and Brennan being considered the architect of it. I want to shift gears, though, and show everybody what Time Magazine is doing to the star of Marco Rubio. They are hurling it pretty high. If you take a look at their cover, they are talking about him being the Republican savior, and there is no question mark behind savior. I'll point that out to everybody. Perry, do you think that this is exactly what Marco Rubio wants at this time, especially given he has been deemed with the response, the Republican response for the State of the Union? So a lot of people have been put up to the plate on that and not hit a home run. So this is a lot of pressure on Marco Rubio.
This is a lot of pressure, and here Marco Rubio, it might be the cover of Time magazine, maybe like too much too soon. On the other hand, he is emerging as a leader of the Republican Party, and not just in terms of being Latino, but also in terms of real issues. He's really the person who's behind this push for the Republican Party to move to the left on immigration reform and get a deal on that. And you see right now, he's the one who's going out and trying to tell the Rush Limbaughs and the Sean Hannitys, we have to change our views on immigration. And that's a really important thing. He's kind of the leader of the more established Republicans trying to move the Tea Party people to the middle, and he's really become a big voice for that part of the party, which is a really important movement right now.
Which is exactly the problem when you want to seek higher office. You cannot be the leader of the party. I think they're not doing him any favors by putting him on the cover as the leader.
He's 41 years old, so you think this is too much too soon?
It's not that it's too much too soon, but he has a job to do, and he should be leading, and he should be governing, and he does risk getting attacked from the far right if he does too much to work with the establishment in Washington, which is exactly the image that Republicans should have. So being a good representation or a model for Republicans doesn't mean you should take on leading the party and trying to fix all the problems within it, especially if you're looking at maybe becoming the president.
Okay, well, he doesn't have the cover of Time magazine, but he does have a lot of the headlines. We're talking about now the New Jersey governor, Chris Christie, who has been pretty vocal about an issue that he brought to light himself, his own weight. But take a listen to how he's responding to a former White House doctor critique his fitness.
If she wants to get on a plane and come here to New Jersey and ask me if she wants to examine me and review my medical history, I'll have a conversation with her about that. Until that time, she should shut up.
Admiral, I want to ask you, the temperament of Chris Christie as a politician to be thrown onto a world stage, do you think that he's got that under control?
You know, I've seen Governor Christie, and I don't know him, speak up very well and forcefully for his constituents like in Hurricane Sandy. In this case, as you may well know, that White House staffer is actually a retired Navy Admiral, Admiral Mariano. And I think she spoke up in support of him. I think that that kind of response was, quite frankly, and some of his responses would make me feel uncomfortable as a citizen, but that doesn't preclude him from being a very viable presidential candidate. But in a sense, I think to some degree that as this goes forward, whether it's the Senator Rubio or the governor, Americans love a much more of an even temper approach to issues. Get upset about Hurricane Sandy, but don't make it personal at all.
Well, when it comes down to it, Susan, did the governor invite this in basically, and with all due compassion to the governor, who obviously battles a weight problem, but by going on Letterman, fitting himself into an ill-fitting chair, and then eating a donut, and kind of like a modern-day Henry VIII, did he open himself up for this?
Well, he took on the situation in typical Christie fashion, but if you do run for president, just like it was discussed when Ronald Reagan ran for president, it was his age. When Dick Cheney was put on as a VP, it was his health. This can be a true issue. Is Governor Christie is his health an issue as running as president? But he did welcome it on a bit, and he's got to be careful how far he pushes that envelope.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about, but you can't have a glass jaw when you invite it in. Our power panel, Admiral Joe Sestak, Perry Bacon, Susan Del Percio, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still ahead, we have